All right, Minda, welcome to the show. It is an absolute honor to have you here with us on the podcast. And I would be curious if you could kind of give people a little bit of an inside look as to what did life look like for little Minda as you grew up in life?
Yeah, thanks, Stu, for having me. Excited to be here with you. I'm 5 feet, so I'm still little Minda, but little.
Little and powerful.
But back then, I definitely was a very ambitious young girl. I mean, even if you ask my mom, she's always like, "I knew you would be something great because you were just so inquisitive." And back then, I was growing up in a very small town, and I would see certain men and women in the community who seemed to demonstrate success, right? They had a nice car, they lived in a nice home, and at 12, 13, you're like, wow, you have a pool in your backyard, those
Yeah.
sorts of things. What did you do to get here? And I would reach out to these businessmen and women. I'd actually go inside their companies and ask to speak with them and ask them questions. And
Dang.
I was just so curious about how people got where they were. And I wanted to make sure that I went on a similar path to do that. And I talked with so many business owners, so it makes sense that I ended up being a business owner myself later down the line. But I was always wanting more, Stu, and I knew that my purpose was a lot larger than where I was. And so that was me. So I always asked the questions back then, and I still ask the questions.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And as you grew up, I mean, that's so weird. Not weird, but like most 12, 13-year-olds aren't going asking people, how did you get there? And it's interesting as you say that. I think that's such a key theme of if you really want to figure out what you want to do with your life and if you want to get there quicker, rather than trying to jump here, dodge there, fall here, slip there, get up and go through all that process. Like if you can find someone, and we talk about this a lot on the show, if you can find someone that's done what you want, you can get there so much faster. Or even in your situation, you probably weren't asking people that per se had done what you wanted to do. You were just asking people that had like good quality life. And even if they're not in the same place that you necessarily want to be, obviously they're going to still give you good tips, good ideas, good things that you can kind of let sit in your brain and think about that ultimately probably helped you get to where you are today. And so that's absolutely awesome. And I'm curious for you, when in your life, right, you're so inquisitive as a little kid, 12, 13-year-olds old, asking people questions. I'm sure every adult is probably like, oh my God, this kid is something about this kid.
Yeah.
I'm curious, was there a point in your life where you started to go, I think I have an idea of what I want to do with my life? Do you remember kind of that moment?
Yeah, I would probably say I had just graduated college, and it was my first job. I was a communication major undergrad, and I realized the job that I was hired to do wasn't the job that I wanted to be doing the rest of my life, right? And so
Mm,
I really, but what I did do, Stu, I realized that even though this isn't the job I want to be doing for the rest of my life, or even for a couple more years of my life, how could I use this ground to the skills that I need to make sure that I'm doing what I want to be doing in the future? And so that inquisitive mind, right? I was an administrative
yeah.
assistant back then, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to be answering these phones. I don't want to be talking to these people, but this is really great customer service. This is really good if I want to be a businesswoman later on, managing and navigating different personalities, learning how
Yeah.
to do budgets, all those sorts of things. And so at that time, I started to think, what is it that instead of focusing on what I don't like about my job, what is it that I like about it? And start
Mm,
to take out those things that I like to start to create or investigate what my future kind of dream position would be. And I started to look at it from a different perspective. And from there, I realized that I really wanted to be a business owner, and I would work to do that because I liked being kind of a Jack or Jill of all trades,
yeah.
handling a lot of different things from my early days. And so that really helped me kind of hone in on where to go. Now, I didn't know what type of business I wanted to have, but I knew that I was good at helping people. And I just kept honing
Yeah.
in and following that trail.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting kind of thing you point out there is it's like, I've similarly had things in my life where I may be doing something or in some sort of field, and that's what I do for work. And maybe 2, 3 years later, I do something else, and all of a sudden a light bulb clicks and it goes, oh my God, the reason I'm good at this is because I did that thing 2-3 years ago that I didn't really think that would help me, but somehow it's showing up in my life that it really helped me. And I'm curious for you, would you say that that's kind of a theme in your life, that continuously the skills you've learned, whether it's been in something that has lit you up and it's what you want to do for the rest of your life, or even if it's not, every sort of step along the way has helped you build more skills to really allow you to do what you do today?
Absolutely. Like I, as you were talking, I was thinking about early in my career, I took a Toastmasters class, and I
Nice.
was very much an introvert. A lot of people may not know that, and
Yeah, I was too.
but I knew, but I knew that at some point, if I want to be, giving presentations, I want to talk or persuade people, I'm going to need to be able to feel comfortable, conveying
Yeah.
my message. And listen, I had no idea that 10 years later I would be a paid public speaker, right? But that Toastmasters class set me up for my future. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, you know what I mean? So to your point, let's not discount some of those early experiences because you don't know how they're going to serve you later on.
Yeah. I'm curious too, that right there was such an intentional, later I got to figure this out in life. If I really want to make the impact, I'm going to have to be on stages and speaking to people. And I'm a fellow introvert as well. And I remember my life, the first moment of like, all right, I got to give a speech. I'm going to pee my pants here. Like, this is the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. Um, I'm curious for you, what do you think is the importance of, and I love your self-awareness throughout all of this is just tremendous. What would you say is sort of the importance of looking at our life, figuring out what are the skills we're going to need, and then putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations like you did, because I'm sure that wasn't comfortable, putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations because that's really going to help us later on.
Yeah, one thing I would say about myself is I'm not perfect, but I am self-aware, right? I have an unlimited amount of that part of me. And I think
Yeah.
that's the part that's served me well because I've said, okay, again, going back to looking at what success looked like when I was in corporate America, I would look at the men and women who were in positions that I wanted to be in, and they were speaking, right? They were leading meetings. And I'm like, if I'm going to be that person one day, I never thought I'd be a public speaker. I just wanted to be in the boardroom, giving my presentation. That's what I
Yeah.
did. And I realized you're going to have to get uncomfortable doing these things because those are the skills that you're going to need to be able to be be a leader in the spaces that you want to. And for me, I just realized, again, I always tell a lot of people, if you say you want a certain role, look at the resumes, look at the job descriptions. Do
Mm.
you have those skills to put your name in the hat? And so for me, I just kind of thought over time, I would see these like proverbial job descriptions of things I wanted to do. And I'm like, well, I need that skill. I need this skill. And I was
Yeah.
never afraid to invest in myself. And I think that's the most important key. Even if you don't have it and you're not doing it right now, you can still invest in yourself at any time. And that's where I really just said, hey, I'll take this class, I'll take this course, because investing in yourself is never going to be a bad thing.
Yeah, and I love that take on it. One of my early mentors, he taught me a philosophy, and he says that in life you're never paid for your time, but you're paid for the value out of the marketplace, right? And it's like you look at someone that's, for example, at the table, as you talk about often. It's like the value they have is more, and that's why they may work the same 8 hours in a day as someone that's an entry level position, but they're going to get paid more because they've had more value. And I love the way you've specifically sort of broken that down of you can intentionally figure out, well, what's the value that I need to get there by looking at the resume or going on the job application. And if you see, this person gives quarterly speeches at the company events, or they like, you really can look, okay, these are the 5 things that I really need to master. These are the things where I need to build value in myself. And if you focus on that, you're going to accelerate your path in an incredible way. I've never heard it that way, but I love that. And so thank you for sharing that. And so I'm curious now, let's say we go a little bit more forward in your life. You're getting in the workplace, and I know a lot of what you talk about now, coach, and you speak stages all over the world. Is you talk about, really what it's like to be a woman of color in the workplace. And I was curious if you could take us back to sort of your first experience of being in the workplace and kind of having this like, wait, what just happened? Or kind of this moment of like, there's something off here. And if you could kind of just take us back to that.
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Stu, because I think also, being a young adult or just being anyone in the working world, that there's moments where you feel like frustrated, isolated, all of those different things. But even if you're hired to do a job, but for me, when I entered into corporate America, I was the only one. I was the only woman of color, the only Black woman, sometimes the only woman. And I realized that I wasn't being treated the same way as some of my other counterparts. But I couldn't like pinpoint what was going on, because part of that self-awareness, I'm like, oh wait, I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing on paper, but I'm still hearing, certain things. Like once my manager made a comment, you people, right? You people love your bright colors. And he joked about how Black people love bright colors. And it was those sorts of things that I would experience that I could not control, right? There was no job description I could go to and say, how do I stop this man from saying these things? Right? It wasn't, I wasn't able to control that part of it. But I got defeated, right? I thought, well, this is just going to be the way it is for a Black woman in the workplace. And so I'll just suck it up, right? This is just who this person is. But as I continued on in my career, I'm like, we all deserve humanity. We all deserve dignity in the workplace. We all deserve to be able to do the best work of our careers, why we're at the place we're at. And that's when I started to think about, I wonder if I'm feeling this way as a woman of color, what other women of color are feeling this way as well. And I started to activate my voice later down the line to say, let's talk about these things, because at the end of the day, I want to make sure that the workplace is working for everybody, not just one particular person.
Yeah. So 2 questions I would have there. Because there's different sides to it. One, let's say there's someone that's listening to this and they're a woman of color and they're going, holy crap, like this happens to me. One, I would be curious, maybe what's a step they can take in the forward direction. And then on a different side that's just equally as important, let's say there's someone that's listening to this that's not of color and they manage people, or women that are of color, and they've started to hear this conversation and go, you know what, if I really think about it, maybe I have saw this or I have seen this. What's something that maybe someone in management that, whether it's a white male, white woman, that has a team of diversity, of women of color, what's something they can do in a power of, I guess you could say, a position of power, right? Because it's like, if you really want to change things, you got to have people that have the influence, have the power to change it. And so what would something be on their side as well, that maybe they can do to make this work environment for people a better and a more safe and more comfortable place, for people to grow? So kind of two questions.
Yeah, I love the question. I think it's important because even though I was going through that situation in various work environments, I never spoke about it, Stu. So my colleagues, they had no idea that I was feeling this not safe in the workplace, right? That being a Black woman, I didn't feel like I could bring my authentic self to work because I was trying to not be too much of what they, you people, right? And so I thought that I couldn't say anything. And so if you're a woman of color listening, there's a quote that I lean on by Audre Lorde. She says, beware of feeling you're not good enough to deserve it. You deserve a manager who's invested in your success. You deserve to establish what good looks like for you and what's comfortable and what boundaries are. And I didn't know that I could create those boundaries in the workplace. I just thought I had to be silent, and I continued to suffer. So what I would say is, if it bothers you or you'd like to continue working where you are, have that difficult conversation in a productive way to let someone know, hey, I understand you didn't mean harm when you said it, but it caused harm, right? So I just wanted to make you aware of that. I wish that I had the agency back then. I wish I would have had a book like mine to say you could do that, right?
Totally.
So that's what I would encourage. It's scary to speak up. It takes courage, but do it from a place of courage, but also empathy, right? And I think I'm thinking that most people, if you have a honest conversation, they'll say, oh, I apologize, I didn't know, and hopefully course correct, right? Because they didn't know. On the other side, as I teach a course at NYU called Talent Development or Talent Management, and everyone in the class are, managers or aspiring managers. And I asked them, how many of you want productivity from everybody on your team. And of course, they look at me crazy, Stu. They're like, of course, we want everybody to be productive. I said, well, you know what? It's going to require you to ask everyone on your team, what do you need from me to do the best work of your career? And when you open up that question, then someone like me feels comfortable to say, you know what, Stu, this is what I need to be successful, right? This is what good looks like to me. And I think we have to say, okay, maybe Minda doesn't remind me of my younger self because we're not the same age, we're not the same color, whatever the case, but I can still be invested in her success. And I think as we courageously have these conversations, we need our managers to be courageous listeners, because it takes a lot of courage for someone on your team to tell you something. And so hear them out, right? Hear them out. And then together you get to a resolution. So it doesn't have to be this defensive or this friction, but it's, hey, how do we make the team better for everybody? And that's a great place. So I wish people would kind of reframe how they think about problem solving, because if all of this is conflict resolution, right?
Yeah. And it's like, you know, if you do have that difficult conversation and it maybe doesn't go smoothly, it doesn't go the way you want, that's an incredible, maybe years of life that you get back, that you go, okay, if this person's not going to respect me, again, a difficult choice you might need to make, but you deserve it. So maybe it is a moment where you go, okay, I got to leave and I got to find someone that really is going to respect me and treat me the way that I should be treated, because I love that quote that you really do deserve it, right? And that you shouldn't settle for anything less. And so one thing I would be curious is, what would you say is one thing or a few things that a woman of color can do to find themselves at the seat at the table? Because I know that's something you often refer to. So what's something they can do to find themselves at that seat?
Yeah. Well, you hit me a good layup, because part of it is self-advocacy, right? Because to your point, even if you have that hard conversation and you're not met with what you hoped would have been in return to you, you now know what you need to do going forward, right? You know that this may or may not be a place that you can thrive in, right? And that's a win for you, knowing one way or the other. And so self-advocacy is one of our greatest tools if we activate it, right? People won't know what good looks like to us if we don't tell them, if we don't show them, and if we don't ask for what we want, right? You know, I remember early in or middle in my career, there was a position that I wanted to go up for and I didn't get it. And I had a conversation with my manager, like, oh, I thought that this was mine. You know, we had this conversation, like, well, you never said anything. And I kind of had to sit back to him, like, you know what? I had been doing all of these things and I thought all the things were demonstrating that I wanted this role, but I had never really articulated that this is what I wanted. And again, that self-advocacy, letting people know what it is you want. So you want a seat at the table, you want to be in the room. Who have you told? Who the next thing, building that relationships. People need to know to be able to speak your name in the rooms you're not in, right? Early in my career, I had a sponsor, older white man. He spoke my names in the rooms that I wasn't in. He advocated for me. And eventually I was invited into that room and was part of the leadership team. But it took someone knowing what I wanted, right? That self-advocacy, building the relationship so that people know how to help you. And then lastly, paying it forward, right? Once we get in those rooms and we're speaking on the behalfs of ourselves and others, make sure that you don't just keep all the goodness for yourself. Remember your little Minda or your former version, and who can you help bringing in that room? Because having a seat at the table isn't just for us, but it's also to make room for others. And so I think when we're building our relationships, advocating for ourselves and helping others, it makes the workplace so much better.
I love that. And I think one thing too that kind of ties in with that is, it's like, as you're going through the self-advocacy process, really allowing yourself to tap into abundance versus scarcity. Because, you know, if we have a job and, you know, especially if we have a family or we have bills and all these things, and we are in a place that we're not being treated right or something like that, it's difficult if we're in a scarcity mindset to say, I'm going to leave and it's all going to work out, because our mind goes to, well, if I leave, I don't have enough food, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough XYZ, all the scarcity things. Versus if we go, you know what, if I'm a person of value, if I'm a person of good integrity, if I'm a person that's hardworking, that I want to help wherever I'm going to be. If I leave where a place is that I'm not comfortable, there's more than an abundance out there. There's someone that'll find me that'll value what I have, and that maybe in an interview they go, wow, you left because of that. Like, I really respect that quality of you, that you advocate for yourself and that you really are pushing for yourself. But if we do that, we gotta remain in an abundance, knowing that there's more than enough out there.
Agreed. Amen. I agree. We have to have that abundance mindset,
Yeah.
because otherwise we'll stay stuck, right? We'll stay in the same spot. And like you said, we all have our responsibilities. We all have our reasons why we stay. But if we ask ourselves, what if I went out and applied to a new job? What if I got a new certification? Then that just allows me to open up the door to all the goodness and the abundance that's waiting for me on the other side of that.
Absolutely. So what would you say, because I know you work with students, you're over at in New York at NYU. I would be curious, what is like a piece of advice if you have students that are coming to you, they're going, I'm trying to figure out my life and I'm in this phase. And I would be curious, is there any sort of common pieces of advice you give them kind of as they take that step into the quote unquote real world or try to figure out their life? What's a common piece of advice you give them?
It's funny that you asked that, because recently I had a student had reached out to me. They wanted to, they were wondering if they should take an internship or not. And on paper, they really liked the internship, but they told me that they weren't comfortable going into an office every single day of the, right now during COVID.
Right.
And I said to them, I said, well, you need to figure out, what is it that you really want, right? What is it that you want? If you stop seeing yourself through the eyes of somebody else or somebody else's version of what you should be asking for, you figure it out. So she figured it out, and she said, you know what? I really don't want to work every day in the office. I don't feel comfortable yet. This is really important to me, but I do want the position. I said, well, you know what? You're going to have to articulate your value and quantify your worth. Let them know that. Tell them up front, be honest with them. And I think that a lot of us, we haven't figured out, we sometimes don't value all the goodness that we have, right? So figuring out what our value is and articulating that to other people, and then you open up a dialogue. And she didn't end up moving on with that, but she felt so good that she was able to articulate what she wanted in her value, and she did move on to find something else that mirrored that. And so the advice is, learn how to articulate your value and quantify your worth, because the workplace needs to know why you're the asset.
Yeah. And it's interesting you asking the question, like, they got to know what she really wants. And an exercise I often take myself through is whether it's a new quarter, a new year, or just a moment where it's like, what's kind of next, is a question I ask myself, and I go a couple layers into it, is what do you really want? And for me, this was a question one of my mentors asked me when I was in a pivotal place of my life, is, I was like, trying to figure out my life. And he goes, well, what do you really want? And I was, would give a surface answer. And he'd go, well, no, what do you really want? And the more and more it boils down to, you get that crystal clarity on what's really your outcome. And just like you said, if it's, okay, I'm not going to go into the office every single day. Now it comes to build the value, articulate your worth, quantitate it. And if you go to these people and you show your value, then they more than likely may go, okay, awesome. You only want to be in the office 3 days a week and not 2 days. We see your value. Absolutely, let's do it. And if that doesn't fit, obviously go back to abundance. There's someone else out there. And so, Minda, you are a wealth of knowledge and wisdom. I've more than appreciated having you on the podcast. I'm curious if people want to find more info on you, see what you're up to. I know you got a couple books and you do speaking all over the place. So where's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I really enjoy the conversation. The best
Absolutely.
place is mindaharts.com. So find me there. All my handles at Minda Harts. Look forward to connecting with everybody.
Awesome. And everybody, it's HARTS with an S, not a Z. And obviously we'll get all that in the show notes. One last question I have for you, Minda, and this is something I ask every guest, because we want to help people find direction, but we're a believer that it's through execution, through action, not just sitting on a couch. And so I would be curious, what would you say is one thing someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life?
Great question. It goes back to what we were just talking about, asking yourself, what if? What if I moved to California for this job? What would that put me? What if I negotiated my next salary? Instead of living in that fear zone, what if, right? What if I asked my manager for a stretch assignment? And so when you're thinking about your next steps, ask yourself, what if? Because it will take you on a ride, and you'll probably uncover so many more things than looking at the areas of deficit, right? There's so much,
Yeah.
as you said, abundance. So ask yourself, what if, and just keep going, keep going.
I love it. I love it. It's a question sometimes I refer to when it comes to what if is it's like oftentimes our brain, right? We go, well, what if it doesn't work? Or what if it doesn't happen? But on the other side, like you're talking about, it's like, well, what if it does work?
Yes.
What if the cards do fall where you want them to fall? What if you do land at that company that treats you unbelievably? So I absolutely love that, Minda. That is a beautiful exercise. We're gonna have everybody go through that. And other than that, just thank you so much for spending your time with us. For everybody listening to this, Minda is in Hawaii and it's 5 a.m. and you're still making it happen. So, Minda, we appreciate you for being here and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.